I'm going to start this the same way I've explained it to the police, my family, and the few people who know the full story. Nothing strange was happening at first. It was a normal night in a normal place, and I had no reason to feel afraid. I was 24 years old at the time. I lived in a quiet part of Pennsylvania, the kind of area where nothing really changes. Same neighbors, same routes home, same routine, every day. That night, I had just finished a late shift and was driving home like I always did. The road was familiar. I'd driven it hundreds of times. 2 lanes.
No streetlights.
Trees on both sides. I remember thinking about what I'd eat when I got home. I remember adjusting the radio because the signal kept fading. Everything felt routine. I wasn't tired. I wasn't distracted. I wasn't in a rush. About 10 minutes into the drive, I noticed something small. So small that I almost ignored it. My headlights caught movement near the shoulder of the road. Just for a second. I slowed down, expecting to see a deer or a raccoon. There was nothing there. I kept driving. A few moments later, I checked my rearview mirror. I do that a lot out of habit. At first, I saw only darkness and my own headlights reflecting off the road. Then I noticed something else. A pair of headlights behind me. Far back. Just far enough to not feel important. I didn't think much of it. This was a public road. Cars passed through all the time, but the distance never changed. I sped up slightly. The car behind me sped up too. I slowed down.
So did they.
Still, I told myself it was coincidence. People drive differently at night. Then my phone buzzed. No signal. No service. That was when I felt the first real sense of discomfort. Not fear. Just awareness. The kind you get when you realize you're more alone than you thought. I turned the radio off. The silence felt heavier than it should have. The road ahead was empty. No houses. No businesses. Just trees and darkness. I checked the mirror again. The headlights were closer now. What bothered me wasn't the car itself. It was the way the driver stayed, perfectly centered behind me.
No drifting.
No passing.
No flashing lights.
Just steady. Patient. I remember thinking, very clearly, that if something went wrong right then, no one would hear it. No one would see it. And no one would find me quickly. At the time, I didn't know this moment would end up on a police report. I didn't know there would be footage. And I didn't know that one small detail, barely visible on camera, would be the reason this case was never fully explained. The drive I was on that night was part of my routine. I worked evening shifts at a distribution warehouse about 40 minutes from my apartment. The job wasn't dangerous. It was boring, steady work. I clocked out at 11:30 p.m. most nights, sometimes later if shipments were delayed. That night was no different. I left work at 11:47 p.m., according to my time card. I remember because I checked the clock before getting into my car. The parking lot was almost empty, with only a few employee cars scattered under the yellow lights. The air was cold and damp, the kind that sinks into your clothes. My route home avoided the main highway. I preferred the back road. It was shorter, quieter, and usually empty at night. A 2-lane road cutting through wooded areas and small patches of farmland. I had been taking that road for nearly a year. The weather was calm. No rain yet. Just heavy clouds blocking the moon. The road ahead was dark, but my headlights lit enough to feel comfortable. I had the radio on low, mostly for background noise. A local talk station fading in and out as I drove. I wasn't expecting to see anyone I knew. I lived alone at the time. No family nearby.
No
roommate waiting up. When I got home, my plan was simple. Eat something, take a shower, and sleep. About 15 minutes into the drive, I passed the last gas station on the route. It was closed. The lights were off, and the pumps were wrapped in plastic. After that point, there were no businesses for several miles. Just trees, old fences, and long stretches of road with no shoulders. I remember noticing how quiet everything felt once I passed it. No cars ahead of me. No oncoming traffic. That wasn't unusual, but it made the road feel longer. The only other person connected to this night was my coworker, Mark. He had clocked out a few minutes after me and mentioned taking the highway instead. I didn't think about him again until much later. At the time, nothing felt wrong enough to turn around. Nothing that would have made sense to explain. It was just another late drive home, the same as dozens before it. That's why what happened next still bothers me. Because nothing about the situation should have made me feel unsafe. The first thing that felt off wasn't dramatic. It was quiet in a way I hadn't noticed before. Not peaceful quiet. Empty quiet. The kind where you start paying attention to sounds you normally ignore. My tires hummed against the road. The radio cut out completely. I didn't turn it back on. I don't know why. I just let the silence stay. That was when I noticed the car behind me again. It was still there. Far enough back that I couldn't make out the make or color, just the headlights. They weren't bright. They weren't flashing. They stayed steady, right in the center of my lane. I checked the time. Just after midnight. I adjusted my speed, dropping about 5 miles per hour. The car behind me slowed with me. I sped up again. Same thing. The distance stayed almost perfect, like it was being measured. I told myself the driver might live somewhere off this road. There were a few hidden driveways I couldn't see at night. That explanation should have been enough. Then I noticed something else. Whenever the road curved, the headlights behind me didn't drift wide like most drivers do. They stayed locked on my car. Smooth. Controlled. I rolled my window down a few inches. Cold air rushed in. I wanted to hear better. I don't know what I expected to hear, but I felt like I needed more information. That's when I heard a faint sound over the wind. A low engine rev, then nothing. The car behind me wasn't trying to pass. It wasn't falling back either. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. I glanced down. No service. I didn't panic. Not yet. But my shoulders tightened. I became aware of how far I was from help.
No streetlights.
No houses. Just trees pressing in on both sides of the road. I checked the mirror again. For a split second, I thought I saw the driver's silhouette. A head leaning forward, close to the wheel. But the glare from the headlights made it impossible to be sure. Another mile passed. Then another. The road narrowed slightly as it dipped downhill. The trees grew closer, blocking what little sky there was. That was when the headlights behind me seemed closer than before. Not by much. Just enough to notice. I remember thinking that if the car passed me, I'd feel better. If it turned off, I'd feel better. Anything would be better than this steady presence. But it didn't. And that was when I realized I was gripping the steering wheel hard enough that my hands hurt, even though nothing had actually happened yet. After another few minutes, I knew I couldn't keep pretending this was nothing. The road ahead was still empty, and the car behind me hadn't changed its behavior once. No passing. No turning off. Just following. I tried to slow down enough to force the driver to pass me. I eased off the gas until I was well below the speed limit. The headlights stayed behind me, closer now, almost filling my rearview mirror. That was the first clear sign that something was wrong. I glanced to the side, looking for a place to turn. There were no visible driveways. No cross streets. The trees were thick, and the shoulders dropped into shallow ditches. Even if I wanted to stop, there wasn't a safe place to do it. My phone was still showing no service. I kept checking anyway, hoping one bar would appear. It didn't. The car behind me crept closer. I could see more detail now. The outline of a sedan. Dark-colored. Older model, maybe. The headlights were slightly uneven, one brighter than the other. The driver was close enough that I could see movement inside the car. A shape shifting. A head leaning to one side, then back to center. I turned my hazards on, trying to signal that something was wrong. The car didn't respond.
No slowing.
No backing off. My breathing changed without me realizing it. Shorter. Faster. I became aware of how loud it sounded inside the car. The road curved sharply to the right. As I took the turn, the car behind me didn't drift or hesitate. It followed perfectly. That's when the distance closed even more. They were tailgating now. I thought about stopping and locking my doors. The idea felt wrong immediately. Stopping would trap me. I thought about calling 911, even without service, but my phone wouldn't connect. I pressed the gas, pushing past the speed limit. The engine strained slightly. The headlights behind me surged forward too. That was when the other driver flashed their high beams.
Once.
Then again. Not as a warning. Not to pass. It felt deliberate. My heart was pounding, but my head felt strangely clear. I realized I had only one direction to go. Forward. There was no way off this road for miles. Whatever this was, it wasn't a coincidence anymore. And whoever was behind me didn't want me to get away. The road ahead dipped again, then straightened. In the distance, I saw something I hadn't expected. A small turnout near an old maintenance gate. Just enough space for one car to pull over. I didn't plan it. I reacted. I slowed suddenly and swung into the turnout. For half a second, I thought the other car would keep going. Instead, it stopped behind me. Too close. So close I felt the vibration of its engine through my seat. That's when panic hit. I threw the car into reverse, then stopped. There was nowhere to go. Trees on one side. A locked metal gate on the other. The sedan behind me cut its headlights. Everything went dark. My doors were locked. I checked them anyway. My hands were shaking so badly, I had to try twice. I reached for my phone again, pressing the emergency call option even though I knew it wouldn't work. Then I heard a car door open.
Slow.
Careful. Footsteps crunched on gravel. They moved toward my driver's side. I stayed still, staring forward, afraid that if I turned my head I'd make it worse. A shape appeared in my side mirror.
A man.
Average height. Dark jacket. His face stayed out of view. He tapped on my window once. Not hard. Just enough to let me know he was there. I didn't respond. I didn't scream. I didn't move. My breathing was so loud, I was sure he could hear it. He leaned closer. I could see his mouth moving, but I couldn't hear what he was saying. Then he tried the door handle. It didn't open. He pulled again. Harder this time. That was when something in me snapped. I slammed my foot on the gas. Gravel sprayed. The car jerked forward. I clipped the edge of the gate, scraping metal, but I didn't stop. I shot back onto the road, barely keeping control. In my mirror, the sedan's headlights came back on instantly. He was right behind me again. This time I didn't slow down. I pushed the car as hard as it would go. The road blurred. The turns felt sharper. My hands burned from gripping the wheel. Ahead, I saw flashing lights. A police cruiser parked near a speed trap farther down the road. I laid on the horn and flashed my headlights wildly. The cruiser pulled out. The sedan swerved. At the last second, it turned onto a dirt path I hadn't seen and disappeared into the trees. I pulled over and stopped shaking only after the officer reached my window. My legs wouldn't move when he asked me to step out. I kept looking down the road, waiting for the headlights to come back. They never did. I thought it was over once the police took my statement. I believed the danger had passed the moment that sedan turned into the trees. At the time, the officer told me I was lucky. He said predators often rely on isolation and panic, and that I did the right thing by driving toward light. I went home just before dawn. I didn't sleep. The next afternoon, a state trooper and a local detective came to my apartment. They asked to see my car. I assumed they wanted to document the scrape from the gate. Instead, they focused on something else. The rear bumper. There was a dark smear near the license plate. At first, I thought it was dirt from the turnout. The trooper scraped a sample into a bag, without explaining why. Then, the detective told me something that made my stomach drop. The sedan had not randomly followed me. They had reviewed traffic cameras from near the warehouse. The same car had been parked across the street from my job site for over an hour before I clocked out. The engine was off. The driver never left the vehicle. He pulled out less than 30 seconds after I did. That meant he didn't choose the road.
He chose me.
The police also checked footage from a gas station I passed earlier that night, one with cameras I didn't even remember noticing. The sedan drove past the station twice before stopping and waiting. In one frame, the driver's window was down. The detective paused the footage and zoomed in. There was something long resting across the man's lap. Not a flashlight, not a tire iron, a knife. Longer than anything I kept in my kitchen. The smear on my bumper wasn't dirt. It was blood. Not mine. They believe he cut himself on the metal gate when I drove off. Dogs tracked a trail from the dirt path into the woods, but it stopped near an old access road. No body.
No suspect. No arrest.
One detail stayed with me. On the gas station footage, just before he followed me the first time, the man leaned forward and looked directly into the camera. He smiled. That was the moment I understood something I hadn't allowed myself to think before. He wasn't chasing me out of anger. He wasn't trying to scare me. He had been waiting for the right moment to stop me. And if I hadn't seen that police cruiser when I did, I wouldn't have made it home at all. The police told me the case was still open, but after a few weeks, the calls stopped. There were no new leads. No matching DNA in the system. No reports that fit his description. Officially, nothing happened beyond an attempted assault by an unknown person. Life was supposed to go back to normal. I stopped taking the back road. I changed my work schedule. I moved a few months later, telling myself it was for convenience, not fear. I didn't talk about the incident unless someone asked directly, but the feeling never left. Every time I drove at night, I checked my mirrors more than I needed to. Every parked car felt suspicious. Every pair of headlights behind me stayed in my thoughts longer than they should have. About 6 months after the incident, I received a call from an unknown number. I didn't answer it. There was no voicemail. The same number called again 2 nights later. Still no message. Then one evening, as I was leaving a grocery store, I noticed something under my windshield wiper. It was a folded piece of paper. No name. No date. Just 3 words written in block letters. You drove fast. I reported it. The police said there was no proof it was connected. No cameras in that part of the lot. No fingerprints on the paper. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., I stood by my apartment window, looking down at the parking lot. My car sat alone under a streetlight. Across the lot, near the trees, a sedan was parked with its lights off. I couldn't tell how long it had been there. I watched it for several minutes. It didn't move. No doors opened. No lights turned on. Eventually, I closed the blinds. I still don't know if it was the same car. I don't know if it was the same man. All I know is that sometimes, when I check my rearview mirror at night, I expect to see uneven headlights right where they were before. And part of me believes that one day I will. The police told me there was nothing more they could do unless something else happened. They said I should call if I noticed the same car again. They said to stay aware. They said most cases like this don't escalate. That wasn't comforting. I tried to return to a routine. I went to work. I went to the gym. I met friends. On the surface, everything looked normal. But my habits changed in ways I didn't notice at first. I never walked to my car without scanning the lot. I never unlocked my door without checking behind me. I never sat in my car without locking the doors immediately. At night, I started keeping the blinds closed, even though I lived on the 3rd floor. I stopped sitting near windows. Silence bothered me more than noise, so I slept with the TV on, volume low. About a month after the note appeared on my windshield, something else happened. I was driving home from a late shift, taking a main road this time. Traffic was light, but steady. I felt calmer, knowing there were other cars around me. At a red light, I checked my mirrors like I always did. 2 cars back, I saw headlights that looked familiar. One brighter than the other. I told myself it was nothing. Headlights aren't unique. Cars age differently. I forced myself to look away. When the light turned green, traffic moved. The car stayed 2 vehicles behind me for several blocks. Then it changed lanes and turned off. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. That should have been the end of it. A week later, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize.
There was no subject line.
The message was empty except for an attached image. It was grainy, black and white. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then it clicked. It was a still frame from a security camera. My apartment building's parking lot. The timestamp showed a time just after midnight. My car was visible under the streetlight. The angle was high, like the camera was mounted on a nearby building. At the bottom of the image, partially cut off, was the front end of a sedan. The headlights were on. Uneven. I didn't open my curtains that night. I slept on the couch, lights on, phone in my hand. I reported the email in the morning. The police traced it to a public network. No name. No location. They asked if I had any enemies. Anyone who might want to scare me. I told them no. Because this didn't feel like someone trying to scare me. It felt like someone letting me know they were still there. Nothing happened for a long time after that. Months passed. The case stayed open but quiet. Eventually, the calls from detectives stopped altogether. But every now and then, I still notice things. A car idling too long in a lot. Footsteps behind me that stop when I stop. A reflection in a window that disappears when I turn. I can't prove any of it means something. That's the worst part. There's no final moment.
No arrest. No explanation.
Just the knowledge that someone once chose me, followed me, and came close enough to touch my door handle. And whoever he was, he knew where I worked. He knew my route. He knew how to wait. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that turnout. About how quiet it was when he turned his headlights off. About how calmly he walked toward my car. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't seen that police cruiser. And I don't know if the reason nothing else has happened is because he gave up. Or because he's still waiting for another moment where no one is around to see.